just talking about some of the general benefits of exercise, especially considering how sort of limited we are at the moment with being able to get out, access sort of leisure centre facilities and sort of any gym facilities or even physiotherapy, rehab through the hospital, those sorts of things. So if we think about some of the general benefits, then we're looking at this stage really to maintain any muscle strength that we have, particularly in those muscle groups which are a little bit stronger and maybe we rely upon on a day-to-day basis for many of our functional activities. It's important that we maintain that level of strength through exercise. And we can also think about our aerobic capacity as well. And there's various ways in which certainly I've been trying to keep fit within the home through doing gardening, cycling on sort of a static bike, using the stairs more frequently than ever, it seems at the moment. Lots of different ways that you can think about maintaining your current levels of fitness so that you're able to go about sort of the day-to-day business of sort of living at home and trying to overcome some of the challenges around that. Obviously, there's a reduced risk as well in some of the cardiovascular disease, as well as stroke. That's important for us to consider as well. And just as Alan already spoke about when he had his slide on exercise, I think it's really important while we are sort of isolated and we are in a sort of state of lockdown, that we think about the positive effect exercise can have upon our mood and our own sort of self-esteem. And there's lots of real strong evidence supporting the role of exercise in helping to improve your mood, quality of sleep, as well as your confidence. And that point just links in similarly with what I previously said. So specifically, what the research tells us around the role of exercise in Pompe disease is we need to think about preventing that shortening of the muscle, which I'm sure all you people have experienced, is around the sort of tightness that you experience. And exercise can have a real positive role in helping to reduce that, because we are using our muscles, we are sort of stretching them and activating them. And as we do so through particular exercises, then obviously we are keeping them moving. And that has a real important role when it comes to reducing that tightness that you experience. Obviously, being stronger, particularly in your lower limbs, is going to have a positive effect upon your overall balance, as well as your confidence when walking outside. But as Alan has already sort of stressed, when we are thinking about exercises within the home, it's really important that we maintain sort of a safety first approach, thinking about keeping hold of maybe a furniture or the stair rail, and making sure that should we feel unsteady, we have something that's going to prevent us from falling over and injuring ourselves. So I think working on balance is important, but you have to sort of think about how you can do that as safely as possible within the confines of your own home. Does anybody have a question around that? Something just popped up on my screen.
It was just a follow-up for maybe after the meeting. When you refer to the research says,
yeah,
you could provide some source material for that. It'd be super helpful while we're all.
That's fine. Yeah, there should be references on the end of this slideshow when I get there. So I can maybe draw your attention to the particular studies that I'm referring to. No problem at all.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And of course, when we're at home, being a little bit fitter, a little bit stronger, is hopefully going to have a positive effect upon our overall functional independence. And again, that's something which we all really value in terms of feeling positive and having confidence in ourselves and having that sort of sense of independence is a really important factor also. And then there's some research that's starting to emerge around the role of respiratory muscle training as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, some of the devices that have been used in research to improve overall respiratory function. there are some limitations to those studies, but should you be, independent enough to engage with these pieces of equipment, then there have been studies which have shown moderate improvements. But of course, when I worked with people with Pompe disease, all of these recommendations sounded good, having read them sort of in the research studies, but the application of those principles to day-to-day life were challenging for many, many people. So some of those, the biggest challenge that I felt people with Pompe disease experience was around fatigue and just how much it took out of them to do any form of exercise, really. So some of the ways around that was just important to structure your day and think about how exercise fits in with the other roles and responsibilities that you have to perform on a day-to-day basis. So thinking about how we can exercise but not have a massive knock-on effect in terms of how that exercise then affects your overall feelings of tiredness. And then obviously for some of the muscle groups are so severely affected, so much so that there is no sort of active movement within those muscle groups, and thinking about how we can perform exercises maybe for those muscle groups that maintain muscle length rather than focusing on muscle strength. So trying to avoid those feelings of tightness in muscle groups rather than trying to improve overall strength. And then, of course, there's effects upon the respiratory system. Having to work harder means you're having to breathe more frequently and more deeply, and that has negative effects upon feelings of breathlessness and shortness of breath, which we know many of the people with Pompe disease are struggling with also. So that, again, can be a very fine balance. I think it's important that if you are engaging in thinking of doing any exercise at home, then you think about how much other roles and responsibilities you have on a day-to-day basis that you need to keep your energy for. I feel that sort of people have a finite amount of energy that they can use on a day-to-day basis, and I certainly wouldn't recommend using all of those energy reserves just to participate in an exercise program. That would certainly be not recommended. And then, of course, pain. So any types of people experiencing pain, then some of the movements maybe will increase those levels of pain. So thinking about whether you're getting any worth out of doing that particular exercise, if it's going to cause you discomfort. I think these are some of the real considerations that you have to make as an individual, and obviously a physiotherapist would be able to help provide individually prescribed exercises that would hopefully account for many of these points here. But at times, the times that we're in at the moment, I think you need to make those informed decisions yourself around the types of exercises you're doing and how they are being affected by all of these points here. So some of the ways we can help structure our exercise to overcome these challenges listed here. I think it's important that if you are going to plan on doing some exercises, then you do so little and often. And what I would mean by that is you do short bursts of sub-maximal exercise. So exercising no more than sort of 7 out of 10. If 10 was the hardest you could possibly work and 0 was sort of no effort at all, then you want to be working at those sub-maximal levels to an intensity whereby you can still hold a conversation, you can still finish your sentences, and you don't feel so out of breath that you would need to stop and take a rest. Okay, that would be the way in which you would maybe describe the intensity of your exercise. So little and often is important. You should allow yourself sufficient recovery time between your exercises. So if you have maybe 3 different types of exercises that you'd like to work on, maybe you have particular weakness in a certain area of the body, certain muscle groups are maybe weak, then before you move on to exercise maybe all 3 muscle groups in one session. Give yourself ample opportunity to recover between the individual exercises. That's really important. And that can be something that's very sort of individual to you. Recovery time is not something that's very easy to prescribe generally. But I would say if you are unsure around that, give yourself sort of 5 minutes between the exercise to think about how my level of exertion is being affected. So where am I on that scale? If you think about maybe finishing exercise, and you think, okay, I'm at that 7 out of 10 level now. If I were to push on, then that would increase my feeling of exhaustion. Then you need to take that opportunity to rest, to come down on the scale to maybe sort of 4s and 5s before you begin another exercise again. So be very sensible around that and self-regulate. Structure your exercise sessions around your day. So, try to think about if you do have a particular task that you need to carry out during the day, then maybe think about being pragmatic in your approach and not exercising immediately after that strenuous activity. Again, that's just going to have an effect of building up those levels of exhaustion, and you're going to reach exhaustion a lot quicker than if you give yourself an opportunity to rest. This point here about planning your exercises ties in with what I've said previously. And please, I would encourage you not to exercise to maximum capacity, okay? Remain within these sub-maximal limits. Exercising at maximal capacity, particularly within your own home, has negative effects around your sort of balance and feelings of exhaustion. And at the moment, I think we need to be sort of very careful around that. So I would recommend, as I've said, keeping within that 7 out of 10 level of intensity with your exercise. The Borg scale is something I would encourage you to use. I can get a sort of image up of it here. So hopefully you can all see this scale here. It's called the Borg scale, and it's just a rating of your own perceived exertions and the level you want to sort of be thinking about. This is something you can Google and quite easily get hold of, these Borg scales. So the level you want to be thinking around is this level here, 13 out of 20.
Steve,
okay.
I'm not seeing the Borg scale.
I'm seeing it.
Are you? Who is? Somebody is?
I've got it on mine.
Oh.
I don't have it on mine.
I can see your presentation before.
Okay.
Oh, that's strange, isn't it? Oh well.
I've got Steve's presentation down the left-hand side, and then I've got the Borg scale up, and I've got a toolbar at the front on Steve, what Steve's showing me.
Yeah, maybe you can see it through this.
I can see it now.
You can see this Borg scale here on the right-hand side?
Yes, that's it.
Yes, I can see it.
So this corresponds quite nicely. This would be something I would advise you if you are going to exercise, that you sort of have a look at, maybe Google the Borg scale of perceived exertion and have a look at the different ratings. And the level at which you want to sort of limit yourself to is this sort of 0.14 on the scale here, around 70% of your maximum capacity. So you can hear yourself breathing, but you're not gasping for air. You're a little bit tired, but you feel as though you can continue. All right, so I would encourage that. It's a very good resource for you to use to make sure that you're exercising within safe limits and you don't hit those points of exhaustion, whereby exercise can have a real negative effect upon the rest of your day and how much energy you have to sort of carry out your day-to-day chores. Okay, so some of the principles then, which I would summarize when exercising. So hopefully I've stressed the sort of avoidance of fatigue and intense levels of exercise. Use the resources that are available to you to inform how hard it is you are exercising, and don't exceed 0.13 on that Borg scale. Please give yourself sufficient rest periods between your exercises to allow you to recover. Do a couple of sets of each of the exercises, but don't do any more than 4. So again, that ties in really with the message of exercising little and often, all right? 3 times a week would be the recommended amount, so no exercise on those rest days in between. If you're going to exercise on a Monday, Wednesday and a Friday, then use the Tuesday and the Thursday to rest and recover. Think about sort of planning your exercise as much as you can. I think that's a very difficult thing for people to do independently at this time. Normally, this last point here around planning and structuring your exercise would be something that a physiotherapist could help you with, okay? So for the time being, just think about maybe a couple of exercises which you feel confident with, maybe focusing on strength one day, and then maybe aerobic fitness the other day. So it's just some examples which I've taken here, focusing mainly on where people with Pompe disease experience most of their weakness around the sort of shoulder girdle, the hip, the shoulder, as well as the lower back. So if you do have access to these TheraBands, I call them, they're just sort of elastic training bands, and they can be really, really useful for home exercises, particularly if you want to work on exercises which are strengthening muscle groups. Then this is a great tool to use, these elastic bands, where the tension of the band helps to activate the muscle group that you're working. So yes, so Barbara has some there. You can get these off Amazon quite easily, maybe get them delivered to your home. But again, think about, my advice here would be to think about the stretchiness of the band. They come in various levels of tension, and you want to make sure that you've got one at a moderate level. In my experience, the ones that are sort of yellow and green tend to be the more moderate stretchy ones, but I would really encourage you to get ones where you can perform lots of a particular exercise and you feel as though you are getting stronger doing high repetitions with a low intensity. Okay, so this is just an exercise here where you are working on the larger muscles of your upper arm, so your triceps, the ones that extend your arm out so your elbow is fully locked. These are a sort of big collection of muscle groups, very, very functional muscles, the types of muscles that are going to help you get out of a chair, the types of muscles that are going to help you get out of the bath, those muscles that take your arm from a bent position to a straight position, where we're using these movements a lot day to day in many of our functional activities. So it's a good idea to think about how you can increase the strength of those muscles so those functional activities become easier and less tiring. So yes, these are nice exercise to do, and you can tie the end, if you are in a seated position again, you can tie the end to something at a higher level, or you could get a partner maybe to hold the end, and you're just looking to take the elbow from a bent position to a straight position against the resistance of the band, okay? And then some of the muscles of the lower limb, particularly those which take your leg away, so thinking more of a sort of sidestepping movement, you can wrap the TheraBand, the elastic band, around the outside of your legs as illustrated in this diagram here, and then moving your knees apart in the direction indicated by the arrows is just going to activate those muscles on the sides of your thighs. So these big, long muscles that travel from your hips all the way down the side of your thighs to your knees. They're very, very important when it comes to maintaining balance, as well as moving around sort of small spaces, thinking about turning around in the kitchen, turning around corners. And if you do get knocked off balance, then these are the muscles that are going to allow you to sidestep out to maintain your balance and not fall over. So these are quite easy muscles to exercise because you can do so in a seated position. some of the important things to consider here is just making sure you keep your back nice and straight and you're in an upright position, and then you take your knees out as far as you are able under the tension of the band, and then return them back to normal. And again, with these exercises, I would recommend you do as many as you are able to do until you hit that sort of 7 out of 10 difficulty. Then you have a rest and you do them again, okay? So sets of 2 sets of however many it takes you to hit that 7 out of 10 difficulty level. So I've tried as much as possible here to incorporate exercises that are in a seated position. So the next one here is the opposite movement to taking your legs apart, squeezing the ball. If you can find one of these sponge balls, they're really quite helpful. We got lots of these knocking around our house at the moment with the boys being home from school. So these sponge balls are quite good, and you squeeze your knees together so that you are making the ball smaller. And again, this is working your muscles of the inner thigh, so your groin muscles. Again, very important muscles when it comes to maintaining balance, as well as your efficiency of walking. This is something in Pompe patients, these muscle groups are always severely affected. Whenever I used to test people's muscle strengths, these muscles more often than not were some of the weaker muscles. So it's those muscles which enable you to take your legs from a lying down position, from out to the side to into the middle, so that your knees meet equal. And that's something I've always found. Many of people with Pompe disease, they really sort of struggle with this particular exercise. But doing it in this upright position makes it a lot easier, because your muscles aren't having to fight against the effects of gravity. If you do it in this position here, then bringing your knees together means that gravity is sort of taken out of the equation. And sometimes your muscles can work a lot more effectively when they don't have to fight against the effects of gravity. And this would be a good example of that here. Moving on, targeting more muscles around the hip. These are particularly important exercises when it comes to maintaining your ability to bring your knee to your chest. Okay, so sort of flexing your hip up, bringing your knee towards your chest. Now, you don't need to work in this extreme of movement as is illustrated here, because very often, it's not very often rather, that we need to be able to bring our knee to our chest in this extreme illustration here. But having strength within these muscle groups that bring the knee up towards your chest is incredibly important in terms of walking, climbing the stairs, going up any curbs when out and about. Again, they are muscle groups which are very, very functional. So I would encourage you, if you are able maybe to buy some ankle weights. Very light ankle weights should be more than enough here. And then in this seated position, by bringing your knee up towards your chest, the ankle weights provide that additional resistance, which means these muscles at the very tops of the thighs here are working and having to sort of increase their strength. This is a really nice and easy exercise to do at home. And again, I would emphasize here that you keep your back and your posture as straight and nicely aligned as you possibly can, okay? So again, this is something you could do in a seated position with these ankle weights, do 2 sets and work to that sort of 7 out of 10 intensity level. I thought I'd include some exercises in a lying position as well. So this focuses more on total leg strength. So by keeping the leg completely straight and lifting it up, by keeping the knee in a fully extended position, again, you're going to work on the muscles, the big muscles of the thighs here. Again, these muscles are very important when it comes to walking, as well as maintaining our balance. Okay, so these are very simple exercises to do, but can be very challenging in this lying down position, because again, working against the effects of gravity. Does somebody have a question? Sorry, something popped up on my screen. No?
Well, we've lost your voice.
Any questions?
You've muted, Alan.
That's strange because I was pressing the button. But
That's okay. Did something popped up on my screen is all? Does anybody have any questions?
I was thinking that many people would find lying on the floor like that very difficult.
Totally impossible.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm limited here by the illustrations that are available. You'll have to forgive the generic illustrations that as physios we use to prescribe people exercise, but they've not really thought about how to adapt these in terms of Pompe disease. Of course, you can exercise in exactly the same way, but in a more upright sitting position. So if you were able to sit more upright, then the principles of this exercise remain exactly the same. So if you're in a more upright sleeping position or a lying position, then you'd still be trying, in this particular example, to keep your leg as straight as possible and lift it about sort of 6 to 12 inches off the bed.
Hello,
Hello.
it's Celia.
Hi, Celia.
I haven't been able to lift my leg up for about 20, 30 years.
Okay.
So most of these exercises are completely impossible for me.
No, I understand that. As it's very difficult to sort of do a one-size-fits-all recommendation around exercise prescription. Normally, I would advise sort of exercises based upon an individual assessment of a person and where they're sort of weak and where they're strong, and it may well be that I would focus on their stronger muscle groups to maintain the strength in those. But I do fully understand that for some people, many of these exercises are impossible because they don't even have adequate strength to move without resistance, let alone adding an element of resistance. I think these exercises hopefully are just give you an idea of some of the options that are available to you. If you do have stronger muscle groups and you're thinking about how you'd like to maintain or increase the strength in those stronger muscle groups, then there may be some options available to you within these particular examples. But under normal circumstances, I would be encouraging you to go and seek the advice of an exercise prescription person like a physio, so you can get an individually tailored program.
Celia, do you have one of these bands? Celia?
No, but quite honestly, none of this is very useful to me because I need all my strength for daily living. Because I live on my own, I have to get all my own meals, and I find that I used to do a terrific amount of exercise. But now it seems to me that I would be putting myself at risk if I did that, because my absolute priority is not to fall, and I do not want to have to go to hospital if I fall. And I used to do all these exercises, but now I'm 74. Living on my own. To be honest, exercises are not you.
Celia, could I ask you a question? Do you have, it looks like you have good strength in your arms, correct?
Are you talking to me?
Yes. Do you,
yes,
do you have pretty good strength in your arms? Maybe you should focus on your arms and keeping those strong.
Yeah, I know, but surely everything I do, like getting off the toilet a million times a day, is going to keep them quite strong. I don't want to use my strength on exercises when I need my arms for vital things.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah, I think if you feel as though you're getting sufficient activity in your upper limbs through having to do day-to-day activities.
Yeah.
What you've just described there with getting up off the toilet would be the exact type of exercise that we would give somebody. It wouldn't necessarily be, can you get up and down off the toilet for us, but we would ask people to bend and extend their elbows against weight to try and increase the strength.
Yeah.
I think in your example, you're getting more than enough exercise as such.
I think so.
Having to sort of go about your day-to-day activities.
Yeah, and
certainly.
getting in and out of bed, you see, moving up the bed. I have to do that, say, 4 times before I get out of bed, finally, when I, get up. And I feel I don't want to use my strength on exercises when I need it.
Yeah, and I think that's
life.
very sensible, because what you have to remember here is when we are asking people to exercise, we are fatiguing the muscles.
Yeah.
And if you are needing to use those muscles to get off the toilet, to pick up a cup, to get in and out of bed, if you have fatigued those muscles through exercise, that's going to have a massively negative effect upon your quality of life. And in those examples, we certainly wouldn't be encouraging people to exercise, because it would have such negative effects. It's such a fine balance to strike.
Yeah.
There's just a couple more slides that we could go through, and I'm quite happy to have quite an informal discussion around exercise. And if people have questions about how this sort of fits into their day-to-day routine, then that would be great to sort of have an open discussion around that and maybe share some ideas. So again, there's just different ways of doing the exercises here. So targeting those muscles which take one leg away from the other. You can work here in this standing position, conscious here of safety, so having something to hold on to, being aware, obviously, that whilst you are standing on one leg, that inherently makes you more unstable. So you could work in this position here, or if for some people who maybe found that too easy, then there's progressions onto your side. But again, these particular movements have real positive effects once you can get stronger on overall balance and stability. I don't know if people have these Swiss balls, these physio balls, but for people.
Oh, I used to have it.
Yeah, these can be quite useful in terms of working on the muscles around your abdomen. And rather than sort of encouraging people to do quite sort of static exercises whereby you're maybe just doing sit-ups and things like that, these balls provide an unstable surface whereby you can do exercises that are far more functional. So the turning, twisting movements that we would encourage people to do on a day-to-day basis that sort of we all do without thinking about really. But doing them in this particular way may help reduce some of those adverse effects around back pain, particularly lower back pain is a big issue. So again, that might be something just to think about. If you're looking to exercise and do something a little bit different, then you could order one of these balls, sit on it, providing you have sort of the adequate balance, and do some of these turning, twisting movements to help increase some of the strength around those postural muscles, which give us a nice upright posture, enable us to expand our chests. And again, that has real positive knock-on effects in terms of our breathing and our efficiency of breathing. Being able to sit more upright, expand our chest is going to have a real positive influence upon our diaphragm, as well as those muscles which expand our chest and allow us to take those deep breaths in. So our efficiency of breathing, if you like. Okay, the references that I alluded to are not on this slide, but I can provide those to Alan, who can distribute them. That's not a problem whatsoever. They're on another one of my presentations, but I didn't include them on this. So Alan, I can share those references with you. You can make them then available to the participants on this Zoom meeting today, and then they can go away and look at those for future reading if they like.